In the quiet mountain town of Juneau, Alaska, people still talk about the man who lived alone by the ridge, a weathered veteran named Samuel Hayes, who came seeking peace after a lifetime of storms. But every time his old dog, Cooper, barked toward the snow-covered mountain, the sky would darken, the wind would rise, and a storm would roll in as if summoned by the echoes of the past. For years, neighbors whispered that the ridge was cursed, but Samuel didn't believe in legends, until the night Cooper stopped barking and started climbing. That was the night the mountain answered back, and nothing in that valley was ever the same again. Samuel Hayes had lived alone at the base of the Alaskan mountain for 6 long winters. He was 58 now, a man carved by time and silence, his days marked by the rhythm of chopping wood, feeding the fire, and listening to the wind scrape across the valley. His slightly long, wavy silver-grey hair peeked beneath a weathered brown cowboy hat, and the scar above his left eyebrow was a faint reminder of a life before solitude, a life of war, loss, and restless memory. He wore a brown leather jacket faded from years of wear, a grey wool sweater, dark jeans, and boots that creaked with each step. His only companion was Cooper, a 10-year-old golden retriever whose golden fur shimmered even under grey light, with a white patch on his chest like a snowflake trapped in sunlight. Cooper had been his late wife's dog, and when she passed, the dog never left Samuel's side. Together, they built a quiet life, one of wood smoke, frozen mornings, and long silences filled with unspoken comfort. But that peace broke one afternoon when Cooper began to bark. It started as a single sharp cry, then another, deeper, wilder. Samuel looked up from his axe, sweat freezing on his brow, following the direction of the barking toward the ridge behind the cabin. The ridge was steep and pale, its top often swallowed by clouds. Cooper's stance was rigid, tail low, eyes locked on something unseen. "What is it, boy?" Samuel muttered, his voice rough and low. The wind was still. Too still. Then the first gust came, sudden and cold, lifting the edges of his coat and sending a wave of snow across the clearing. He watched as the clear sky shifted, clouds gathering like breath held too long. Within minutes, the mountain darkened. Cooper barked again, louder, as if defying something. Then the storm arrived. The wind howled, tearing through the valley like a scream from the earth. Snow pounded against the cabin walls, the door rattling in its frame. Samuel stumbled inside, slamming it shut, his breath ragged, heart thundering. Cooper stood at the door, barking into the storm, tail rigid, fur bristling. "Enough, Cooper!" Samuel shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of wind. For hours the storm raged, relentless, wild, unnatural. It ended as quickly as it began. The next morning, sunlight broke through thin clouds. Samuel opened the door and stepped out into a world reborn. The snow was untouched, smooth, and eerily silent. Cooper bounded forward, stopping near the base of the ridge. There, something dark jutted from the snow, the corner of an old wooden structure, half buried and black with age. Samuel's breath caught. The storm hadn't come from nowhere. It had come from here, from whatever was under the snow. He stood motionless as Cooper sniffed the ground, whining softly, tail low. The air was still again, but the silence was heavy, like the world itself was waiting. Samuel's gaze traveled up the ridge, to the white slope disappearing, into the clouds. "We'll look tomorrow," he whispered, though his gut already knew tomorrow wouldn't wait. When Cooper barked, storms followed. But this time, Samuel could feel something else. Something calling back. The mountain wasn't sleeping. It was listening. The next morning, the air was sharp and clean, the kind of cold that made every breath burn. Samuel stood at the cabin door, his brown leather jacket creaking as he moved. Cooper waited beside him, tail still, eyes fixed on the ridge. The dark wooden edge they had seen yesterday was still there, a jagged line in the snow like a wound in the earth. Samuel hesitated. Something deep in his gut told him to leave it alone. But solitude breeds curiosity, and curiosity in men like him always lead somewhere they shouldn't go. He grabbed his old shovel from beside the shed and started walking toward the ridge, boots sinking into the soft snow. The sun hung low, spreading a dull gold glow across the valley. Cooper padded beside him silently, only breaking stride when the wind carried a strange sound, a low hum or whisper that seemed to echo from under the mountain itself. "Easy, boy," Samuel said, glancing down. The dog's fur bristled, his nose twitching. When they reached the ridge, Samuel crouched beside the exposed timber. It was old, very old. The grain of the wood was darkened with time, its surface frozen solid. As he brushed the snow away, letters began to appear, faint carvings almost erased by decades of ice. U.S. Army Corps, he murmured aloud, brushing harder. 1962. His breath caught. He had served in the army. He knew that name. But what would a military marking be doing buried in a mountain this far north? He looked toward Cooper, who growled softly. The wind changed again. The clear sky dimmed as clouds rolled down from the peak, heavy and fast. "Not again," Samuel whispered. He had barely finished the thought before the wind struck, fierce and cold. Snow whipped around them, the ridge vanishing in white haze. Cooper barked, sharp and panicked, circling Samuel as if trying to drive him back. But Samuel stayed kneeling, staring at the wooden beam that now vibrated faintly under his glove, as if something below was moving. Then, from beneath the snow, came a hollow thud. Samuel froze. His heartbeat pounded in his chest. The sound came again, a dull, deep knock, rhythmic and deliberate. Cooper growled, ears flat, backing away. The wind howled louder, carrying flakes sideways. "We're leaving," Samuel said firmly, grabbing the shovel. But before he turned, one last gust swept the snow clear. And there it was, a door. A solid wooden hatch buried under ice, with rusted hinges and a faded warning sign barely legible. "Restricted access." Samuel's throat tightened. The cold suddenly felt heavier, darker. He stared at the sign, his hand trembling over the latch. Cooper barked again, frantic, pulling at his jacket sleeve. For a moment, Samuel almost opened it. Then thunder cracked across the mountain, shaking the ground. He stepped back as snow slid from the slope, burying the hatch again. Cooper barked wildly, the storm swelling in seconds. They ran, heads down, wind tearing at their coats, until the cabin came into sight through the white blur. Once inside, Samuel bolted the door, chest heaving. Cooper collapsed near the fire, still growling softly toward the ridge. Samuel stared out the small window, his reflection pale against the frost. "What the hell did we find, boy?" he whispered. Outside, the storm raged again, another called by Cooper's bark. But this time, it wasn't random. It was warning them to stay away. The storm raged all night, but Samuel couldn't sleep. The sound of the wind seemed to come from inside the walls, whispering through the gaps in the old cabin like words he almost understood. Cooper lay by the fire, restless, his tail twitching even in sleep. Every so often, he would lift his head, ears pricked toward the window, then let out a low, uncertain growl. By dawn, the storm had eased, leaving behind a silence so deep that even Samuel's heartbeat felt too loud. He poured himself a cup of black coffee, the steam fogging the frosted glass. The ridge loomed outside, quiet again, covered in fresh snow, hiding everything that had been exposed yesterday. He tried to tell himself it didn't matter. But the memory of that hollow knocking sound under the ground gnawed at him. It wasn't wind, or rock, or ice shifting. It was deliberate. He felt it. "We're staying put today," he muttered, though Cooper was already standing by the door, tail low but wagging hesitantly. The dog whined, as if urging him to follow. "You've got a bad habit of dragging me into trouble," Samuel said with a tired smile. He opened the door, and the cold hit like a wall. The world was bright, too bright. The snow reflected the sunlight until everything shimmered white and gold. The air was sharp and brittle, each breath a sting. They walked slowly toward the ridge, retracing their half-buried footprints from the day before. Cooper moved ahead, nose low, fur glowing under the light. When they reached the spot, Samuel stopped short. The hatch was visible again. The snow had melted away in a perfect circle, though the temperature was well below freezing. The wood was dry, steam faintly rising from its seams. Samuel knelt, his hand hovering above it, warm. "That's not possible," he whispered. Cooper whimpered, backing up slightly, fur bristling. Then, faint but clear, came a sound. Tapping. Not random this time. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. Samuel froze, eyes wide. The same rhythm, the same as a code, the kind used by soldiers when trapped or separated. He knew it instantly. "SOS," he breathed. Cooper barked once, sharply, facing the hatch. The snow around them began to stir, though no wind blew. Samuel's breath turned to mist as the cold grew stronger, the air thickening with a strange vibration. Then came a voice. Muffled, distant, but human. "Help." It was barely more than a whisper, but it came from below the ice. Samuel's heart thudded painfully. He looked at Cooper, whose ears were flat, tail rigid, eyes locked on the hatch. For a moment, neither moved. Then Samuel began to dig. The shovel bit into snow and ice, his gloves burning from the cold. Cooper barked in short bursts, as if urging him faster. After several minutes, the wooden hatch was fully exposed again, its hinges iced over, but intact. The sound stopped. Samuel leaned close, listening. Nothing. Only silence and the faint crack of settling snow. "If there's someone down there," he muttered, "they've been there a long time." He reached for the handle again, but before he touched it, Cooper lunged forward, barking furiously, blocking his hand. The dog's hackles rose, teeth bared. Samuel hesitated. Then he heard it again. Not the voice this time, but something else. A mechanical hum, deep and steady, coming from below. It wasn't human. The ground vibrated once, enough to send a trickle of snow sliding past his boots. Cooper barked toward the mountainside, frantic now, and Samuel followed his gaze upward, where a thin stream of smoke, dark and unnatural, rose from the ridge. "Oh, hell," he whispered. The mountain was waking up again. The smoke rose slowly, twisting through the cold air like something alive. Samuel watched from the cabin window, his hand frozen halfway to his coffee cup. Cooper paced near the door, tail low, whining softly. The storm had stopped hours ago, but the ridge looked different now. Darker, restless, as though the snow itself were breathing. Samuel stepped outside, pulling his coat tighter, the wind carrying a faint metallic scent that didn't belong in a mountain wilderness. "Stay close, boy," he murmured. Cooper trotted beside him, fur rippling, eyes fixed on the ridge. The sun was weak, filtered through a haze that turned everything pale grey. As they approached the slope, Samuel noticed the snow had melted in strange patterns, circular, spiraling outward from the point where the smoke rose. In the center, black earth steamed, and a smell of burnt metal stung his throat. Cooper barked sharply, then froze, staring at something half-buried near the melted circle. Samuel knelt, brushing the snow aside with his glove. Beneath the surface lay a piece of metal, corroded and torn, stamped with faded letters. U.S. Army, Project Silo. His heart skipped. He had heard that name before, decades ago, during his service. A classified weapons experiment, cancelled after an explosion. But this was Alaska, not Nevada. What was it doing here? He turned the metal over, revealing a jagged hole that looked like it had been blasted from the inside. A chill ran through him. Cooper whimpered, backing up, ears flat. "It's all right," Samuel said, though his own voice trembled. The air around them seemed to vibrate faintly, and the snow under his boots pulsed, once, twice, like a heartbeat. Then came the sound again, that deep mechanical hum, now louder, closer. It rolled under the ground like thunder trapped beneath the ice. Cooper barked furiously toward the ridge. "Easy!" Samuel shouted, but the dog didn't stop. The hum deepened, shaking the snow loose from the pines. And then, from beneath the ridge, a section of snow collapsed, revealing a dark tunnel mouth lined with metal, half buried but unmistakably man-made. Warm air rushed from it, carrying the faint smell of oil and rust. Samuel's eyes widened. "An entrance," he muttered. He took a cautious step forward. Cooper growled, tail low, body tense. The inside of the tunnel was dark, lit only by a faint red glow pulsing deep within. Then something moved. Just a shadow. A flicker. Samuel froze. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing into the black. No answer. Only the hum, steady and unearthly. Cooper barked again, louder, his voice echoing off the tunnel walls. The red light flickered, then died. Silence. For a moment, the mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. Samuel turned, ready to retreat, when a gust of wind burst from the tunnel like a sigh, scattering snow around them. The sound that followed was faint but clear, a metallic clang, like a door closing, deep underground. Samuel's pulse quickened. He backed away, pulling Cooper with him, eyes locked on the tunnel's mouth. "We're not alone here," he whispered. They hurried back down the slope as the wind rose again. Behind them, the smoke turned darker, curling into the pale sky. The mountain that had once felt lifeless now seemed to be watching, awake, breathing, waiting. For hours after the smoke thickened, Samuel couldn't sit still. He paced the cabin, boots creaking over the old floorboards, hands trembling slightly around his coffee cup. Cooper lay near the fire, eyes half open, tracking his every move. Outside, the wind had gone eerily quiet. Too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. The ridge loomed in the distance through the cabin window, its slopes dark under the pale light. Every instinct in Samuel told him not to go back. But curiosity was stronger than fear, and perhaps, beneath it all, there was guilt, the kind that never really goes away. By midday, he had his old army flashlight, his gloves, and his rifle. "You stay close, boy," he said softly. Cooper wagged his tail once, uncertain. Together, they stepped into the snow. The air was unnaturally still, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. When they reached the ridge, the tunnel mouth gaped black against the white. The red glow was gone now, but a faint warm air still pulsed out of it, carrying that same smell, metal, oil, and something like burnt ozone. Samuel knelt at the entrance. The metal walls of the tunnel were warped with rust, but he could still make out the bolts and welded seams. It wasn't a cave, it was built. Human hands had shaped this place long before the mountain swallowed it. He flashed his light down the corridor. The beam vanished after a few yards, eaten by darkness. "Anyone in there?" he called. His voice echoed back distorted, stretched, as though the tunnel itself had spoken. Cooper whined, ears flat. Samuel hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The floor clanged faintly under his boots. It was metal too, slick with frost. The walls were marked with strange patterns. Some looked like rust, others like handprints. The deeper they went, the colder it became. And yet, Samuel could feel a faint vibration beneath his feet, like machinery still working far below. They reached a turn where the tunnel widened into a chamber. A collapsed steel door leaned against the wall, half crushed by rockfall. Samuel brushed frost from a sign nearby. Project Silo, Level 1 Access. His breath caught. He remembered that name. It wasn't just an experiment. It was a containment site. "Jesus," he whispered. Cooper growled low, backing up. "Easy, boy," Samuel said, lifting his flashlight toward the dark. Then, faintly, something blinked back. A small green light on a console half buried in ice. The light flickered once, then twice, steadying into a rhythm. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Morse code again. SOS. "Someone's alive," he breathed. But even as he said it, He knew it couldn't be true. This place had been buried for decades. He moved closer, brushing snow off the control panel. A faint hum rose, mechanical and alive. Power, he muttered. After all these years? The ground beneath his boots shuddered. Cooper barked sharply, backing, toward the entrance. "Wait!" Samuel called, but then came the sound, a deep, hydraulic hiss, followed by the slow grind of metal shifting. From the far wall, an old door began to slide open. The air turned hot, rank with iron and smoke. Samuel stepped back, rifle raised. "Who's there?" he shouted. No answer, just that hum growing louder, like a heartbeat magnified. Then, through the gap, came a sound he hadn't heard in 30 years. A mechanical voice, warped and cold. "System! Rebooting!" His stomach twisted. This wasn't a shelter. It was a vault. Cooper barked again, frantic, pulling at his coat. "We're leaving," Samuel said. But before he could move, light flooded the chamber, red emergency strobes flickering across the ice. A blast of wind pushed through the corridor as the mountain seemed to exhale. The hum turned into a roar, the floor trembling. "Come on!" Samuel shouted. They ran, boots clanging on metal, snow spraying through the entrance as they burst back into the open air. The sky was a pale white sheet above them, the ridge shuddering with faint aftershocks. Behind them, the tunnel glowed dimly with red light, alive once more. Samuel turned, breath steaming in the cold. Cooper stood beside him, chest heaving, eyes locked on the entrance. The mountain was awake now. And it remembered him. The ridge was trembling again. Samuel stood in the snow, staring at the glowing red tunnel mouth, his breath forming ghosts in the frozen air. Cooper barked once, low and uncertain, as if warning him not to go back. But Samuel's eyes were fixed on that light. He'd seen lights like that before. Not in mountains, but in deserts, far from home, where he had once stood as a soldier watching experiments no man should have witnessed. The hum beneath the earth grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. "It was never buried," he whispered. "They built it in the mountain." Cooper whined, circling him, tail low. "Easy, boy," Samuel murmured, but his voice shook. The sound of metal echoed from below, deep, rhythmic, mechanical. Then, cutting through it, came another sound, a voice. It was faint, distorted, but undeniably human. "Samuel Hayes, do you copy?" He froze. The name came from the tunnel, echoing faintly against the walls of the valley. "That's impossible," he breathed. The voice came again, clearer this time, the same tone he remembered from a lifetime ago. His old commanding officer, Captain Willis, dead since 1972. "You left it unfinished, soldier." The words sent a chill through his bones. He stumbled backward, shaking his head. "No," he whispered. "That can't be." But the mountain roared in answer, the hum deepening, the snow at his feet trembling. A crack split the ridge above them, and smoke poured from the tunnel in thick black plumes. Cooper barked furiously, pulling at Samuel's sleeve, urging him away. But Samuel stood rooted, staring as the mountain seemed to move, the snow shifting, collapsing, revealing steel plates, cables, and what looked like massive doors buried in ice. "Project Silo, reactivation sequence." A metallic voice blared through the storm, loud enough to shake the sky. Red lights flashed beneath the snow, moving upward in a line like a pulse of awakening machinery. Samuel's heart pounded. He turned toward Cooper. "It's not over," he said quietly. Then he ran. They raced down the slope as the ground shuddered violently. The ridge cracked open behind them, spilling fire and debris. A gust of heat swept across the valley, melting the snow in seconds. The cabin in the distance stood small and fragile against the blaze of red light blooming from the mountain. Samuel stumbled, nearly falling, but Cooper circled back, barking, pushing against his leg to keep him moving. "Go, boy!" Samuel shouted, but Cooper refused to leave him. They reached the cabin just as another explosion thundered across the ridge, blowing the door off its hinges. Samuel grabbed the old radio from the shelf, static hissing through it. "This is Hayes," he yelled into it. "This is Samuel Hayes. If anyone's receiving, shut it down." But only static answered. Then, through the static, a faint voice whispered, "It's awake, and it remembers." Samuel dropped the radio, staring toward the ridge. The mountain's glow was dimming now, the hum fading to a low rumble. Slowly, the fire died out, leaving only smoke rising into the grey sky. Cooper pressed against his leg, trembling. Samuel rested a hand on the dog's head, his glove covered in soot. "Whatever they buried," he said softly, "it wasn't dead." They stood there for a long time as snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the black scars across the slope. When the light finally faded, the mountain was quiet once more. Samuel turned toward the cabin, weary but calm. He knew he would never leave this place now. Some ghosts were not meant to rest. As the last sunlight broke through the clouds, Cooper lay beside him by the fire, the two of them framed against the snow-covered window. Outside, the wind howled once, almost like a sigh of relief, before fading into peace.